Let's stand, please. Would you pray with me? Our Father, we thank you for the day that you've given us in this beautiful weather. We pray, Father, that you would continue to bless this board and the members. We ask your blessing upon the administration of this board. And Father, help us to make good, wise decisions. Lord, give us the wisdom and the understanding and the ability to learn of the things we need to do. I thank you for the ones that are here today. I ask you to bless their lives. Lord, we just ask your presence in this meeting today and all these things. We ask in Jesus. Amen. Tommy, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Now join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Rice, would you lead us in the pledge to the Texas flag, please?
Yes, sir. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. You may be seated. This time we'll open the floor for public comment on any item on the agenda. If you would introduce yourself to everybody and just so we know who we're talking to.
Good afternoon. My name's Jackie Reagan. I'm with Datry Technologies here in Abilene. I'm a communication architect team lead for our company. I've been associated with the telecom industry for 39 years here in Abilene. And I've consulted business owners concerning their communications billing and circuits over those years. We're, of course, a local company that sells voice over IP products to businesses in all different forms and facets. I'm attending today to comment on agenda item BR 25-03 and -04 to express our concerns over the rates that have been put in place by the Abilene-Taylor County 911 District. The rates that are being charged to business owners in Abilene-Taylor County are the highest in Texas, if not the highest in the U.S. We see the billing for other cities around Texas and other states as well. And Abilene-Taylor County's fees are the highest that anywhere that we've seen in all my research. Compared to Austin, Houston, Lubbock, Wichita Falls, I pulled a sampling of comparable sized cities around the state, and from my research, I've found that Abilene-Taylor County is the highest 911 fees for landlines, not necessarily for residential, but for landlines and trunks and business lines. So we provide our customers billing through our vendors. Our vendors use third-party taxing agencies to impose and forward those charges on to our consumers. Just to give a quick example of what that might look like to our customers, say a business owner comes to us and they have an office and they want to establish 10 voice over IP phones. So normally our profile charge per phone is $20, and we're just talking round numbers here. So once that is put into our voice over IP system, and then we submit it for billing to our customers, the way the taxing agencies are figuring that is they are charging us $17.80 per telephone that we put into that business. So if you add those together, the base fee for the customer to get a service from us is $200. Then we add the 10 lines that we put in at $178. The 911 fees are almost as much as the service that we're providing. So for this customer to have a 10-phone system, we're talking about $378 without any of the additional fees and taxes that are imposed, local sales tax, FCC taxes, things like that. We're at $378 before we get started. So we we frequently field calls from our customers inquiring about why their fees have went up so much. Just as a matter of fact, in 2021, the rates for residential lines were set at 62 cents. A business line was $5.58, and a business trunk was $7.40. Fast forward to last year, at this time, there was a rate adopted, and the charges went from 62 cents to $2 for a residential line, went from $5.58 to $17.80 for a business line, and then the business trunk went from $7.40 to $17.80. Okay, there's a lot of verbiage in here that we feel like is old. I've been in touch with Stan Lambert's office, and I have a meeting scheduled after this current session to go in and discuss with him the Texas Health and Safety Code, the Texas Administrative Code, all these codes that apply to the board and these fees, to try to work out some of the verbiage that's in there. Now, I know back in 2021 that the rate was figured on a calculation from the principal service provider, which is AT&T for this area. And so we had like a 6%-ish fee for the charges. Fast forward to 2024, when these rates were put in, the fees were set as a flat rate other than set by a percentage of AT&T's fees. Okay, with that being said, AT&T has also no longer, they've kind of got out of the analog copper line business, and these documents that are being sent out are reflections of the old copper trunks, things like that, that I know the district's moving away from. They're getting away from the T1s and things like that. So these charges that are being charged are not applicable today as they were when 911 was instated. And I think the forms need to be updated to change that, and also take that in mind when you set your fees of what you're sending to these taxing agencies, 100 plus of them that y'all receive collections from different providers, not just our companies, but the Ring Centrals and AT&Ts and all that stuff. So there's some verbiage on the current contract. I'm not going to go into that. I'll state it on the remittance form that's there now. It says the rates reflect both wireline and voice over IP rates approved by the board in February 28, 2024. Well, when I go and look at that form, I do not see what the VoIP rate is. I do not see what a static or wireline rate is. That verbiage does not match up to what's on the form for the charges. So looking forward to the Texas Administrative Code in Title I, Part 12, Chapter 255, Rule number 4, the section states that a service provider using one or more facilities with multiple calling capabilities to serve a single end-user customer location that cannot determine the actual number of local exchange access lines or equivalent local exchange access lines being served, such as enterprise voice over IP applications, shall assess 911 emergency fees as follows. And there's a form that's on this administrative code. And basically what it states is that if a customer has between 81 and 100 DIDs, they should only be charged for 30 DIDs. And in the remittance form, it does not inform the taxing agencies about that. And I know a lot of them probably don't read the whole, I've been reading it for a year, trying to find out all these amendments and everything that goes on in that code. It is very confusing, and I think it would help to forward this on to the taxing agencies so they have a little bit better idea how to calculate these taxes and such. So another example that I have, is we have a customer that has 120, let's say DID profiles. There is a limit in the statute that says that you can only be charged for 100 of those. Well, if we have a customer with 120 numbers, and we start kind of doing the math again, and they cap out at 100. So we're looking at, you know, say $20 a line, or sometimes they're less. But just the 911 fees for this customer is $1,780 that they've been increased on their monthly phone bill. This is per month. $1,780 for a customer that has 120 phones on our service. So I'm just wanting to mention these things to bring it to light, that we think that there needs to be some serious discussion and adjust the 911 fees. Some of the highest ones I see in the state were like $6.81 if you still use the format of wireline or trunk. I even read a FCC report that shows that that all the emergency communications districts submit what they're charging. And again, this is where I found the highest one that's being charged is $6.81. And that's basically what I have to comment on. And of course, I've referenced the Texas Utility Code, the Administrative Code, the Health and Safety Code, the FCC, and the Commission on State Emergency Communications. Thank y'all.
Anybody else for public comment? All right. We'll move to agenda item in the regular agenda. Receive a report, hold discussion, take action on approving the minutes from the special meeting held on December 18th. Charlotte?
I don't really have a comment on it. I was just,
Okay.
it's on there for me.
They're in your packet. I think
Yeah.
it's the first thing that comes up. Has anybody got any thoughts about this agenda that was on our special meeting?
Chairman, having had a chance to look over these prior to the meeting, I move that we approve the minutes from the February 28th.
Have a motion. To have a second?
I second.
Have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. BIM 25-01 is the informational memorandum. The year is for 2025 911 District Operational Review. We're going to receive a report, hold discussion, and acknowledge the review of 2025 911 operation. Troy Swanson.
Yes, we'd like to give just a small briefing here at the beginning of the meeting that speaks to the fact that we've reallocated our resources inside of my shop to dedicate personnel to the 911 District Administration. At my right is Charlotte Allison, who's basically been appointed the Division Manager of 911 District inside of my shop, and to her right is Rebecca, who's been appointed to the position of 911 Program Coordinator. With these two full-time roles and their dedication at 100% to this function, we've been able to make great inroads on both the administration of the Next Gen 911 project, as well as the operation and conducting business of the 911 district. So we just want to give you that update. In addition, I'd like to acknowledge that as part of the 911 program or coordinator role that Rebecca's taking on, we will be able to diminish some of our reliance on outsourced services in the area of GIS, et cetera. So you'll see as we go through the financials that we're proposing a reduction in that outside service as we bring that service inside the shop. Historically, the 911 district has had GIS personnel be a labor expense to the district, and we're just bringing that back inside with this execution. I would take any questions.
Anybody got questions for Troy?
The only comment I'd make is I think this is in line with past history. If I remember right, Ed Boyle used to be in the same position that Charlotte is in now, and Mike Saxton used to be in the exact same position that Rebecca is now filling. So I think this is right in line with our history.
Any other comment? We don't need to vote. This is just an acknowledgement, right? All right, let's move to informational memorandum BIM 25-02, the review of ESINet. Troy?
Yes, we've been working on we'll get the slide up here. Too many. There we go. As we've discussed in previous meetings and we're introducing here in the previous item, we are working on the Next Gen 911 project. We do look at it as a capital level project. It's got a this year cost of about 2.6 million and a real cost of about a total project cost over 5 years of about 3.6 million. 3.1 million. So the project is moving forward. At this stage, in this kind of a project, we're seeing the equipment being ordered and the telecommunication circuits orders being issued and fulfilled. As we move forward, you'll see us actually engage a project manager and start accomplishing the work. The size of the project, those kinds of project managers for the AT&T side of the house that's performing this work are fairly limited resource, and so it has to be scheduled in advance. So the delay is the nature of the animal for that particular industry in engaging the project manager. I take any questions at that point.
When do we see this being finished?
We have it targeted at the end of this year.
End of planning.
We want it to be done by December. That's how we're managing the project.
And the total cost of this, if I'm understanding correctly, was done through grants?
Correct. This is originally, we were forecasting the consumption of fund balance of the district to accomplish this project. In the interim time, we actually did solicit, apply for, and get a grant for this project, approximately $2 billion. In addition, through a Proposition 8 at the state of Texas level, they've provided us an allocation of earmark money for a similar type of project definition of about 1.082 million. So we have a little more than 3 million in outside funding that came to the table for this project. With that initial year of total project cost of about 2.6 million, we have well enough in that kind of funding source to not end up touching fund balance to accomplish this effort.
Which is a good thing.
Very good thing compared to what we were facing before. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move forward to BR 2503. Who's going to lay this one out?
Alrighty, this first slide, we're kind of introducing the subjects we're going to touch on. You get 6 bullets there. I'd ask Rebecca to move forward with the next slide. Basically, this is a graphic that demonstrates what has had the greatest effect on our revenue, and that is that $1780 for the business lines and its peers. And through this graph, we can see through May what the revenue was up to that point, in that middle yellow column above that is in the 90,000 range. As we shifted rates to that new rate, you can see the difference in revenue that was realized as a result of that effort. And we have a couple other columns that were affected as well. If we move to and you can see the graph to the right, how that stepped up. Next page there, Rebecca. So on this page, we basically in the upper rows, we should have made that larger, I suppose. We can see that we have the revenue that we've realized in the last year with that step up partially through the year, and basically it helped us meet our revenue forecast to become net neutral on the fund balance. That was the whole goal of that particular rate, is to become net neutral. As we move into 25 in the second row of colored data, what we see is that we're able to continue to sustain that level of revenue that balances out and becomes net neutral against the expenses that we have for this year. So we were through for the audience's sake, previous year we used an outside agency to develop that and estimate those rates that would become net neutral for the district, and they were spot on, is really the storyline there. We did see exactly what we predicted as a result of these rates. Now, that said, at that time, we were trying to maintain a net neutral effect on the fund balance because the fund balance at that time had just enough monies to accomplish the Next Gen 911 project. Since then, our fortunes have changed and we have a grant. So this has allowed us to sustain the 3.7 million targeted fund balance of that era, but now we aren't projecting the consumption of that fund balance for the Next Gen 911. We did sustain many of our expenses as a result of all that at the same predicted rates that we saw in that particular time, and that has all come true as well. Next slide. In this slide, there's a lot of detail here, and I know it's in the board's packets. It's tough for the audience to see. Here we're basically demonstrating a fiduciary responsibility on the expenses and the expense report and all the different object codes we spend funds against. This allows us to do that financial report that we look at monthly and you folks review annually. Next slide. Here are some of the areas of greatest change that we're proposing in this item before us today. I've highlighted them in yellow here, but they map to some of the text that's in your board packets as well as in the summary revised budget. Here's a description, and here's where we could linger and have some discussion if you would like. These are some of the changes, those yellow highlights that we just spoke of, that we have brought forward in this proposed revision to the budget, to the current year budget. Are there any items here that you would like to ask about?
When does this budget end?
Our fiscal year is September 30th, so we're approximately 5 months into it.
So we've gone up from, on our revenues, we've gone up from 848,000 to 1,110,000.
That is a trend that we're seeing in the wireless revenue. The wireless revenue was originally budgeted at 848, but that revenue continues to grow and evolve as people swing in our area more and more to cellular service. Right now that rate is 50 cents per line per month. There are moves afoot, I should let it be known, that there are moves afoot to solicit or lobby the legislative body of the state of Texas to increase that. And I've heard through my peers that proposal is anywhere from 75 cents to $1, which would be a 50 to 100% increase if they were successful in that. So that revenue stream does continue to grow.
And you came down, the revised revenue for wireline services came down?
That is a result of the estimated rate change that we proposed in this package, but consider that a bookshelf in. So we're showing you if we bring it down to the lowest number possible to maintain a fund balance and a target of, in the text we'd see 2 million plus 200,000 for minor projects, we would come down that far and reduce our revenue estimate for this year in that regard as a rate change come in June to $1.70 for residential and $11.80 for business. It is up to the board to approve that. The board could also amend that, and the bookshelf ends would be continue to sustain the current $2 and $17.80 rates. That would continue to become net neutral on the fund balance and our ability to reimburse the dispatch programs as one of our largest expenses, and maintain a fund balance of about $3.7 million. There is a sweet spot in the middle of about $1.85 for residential and $16 for business line that would allow us to strive for approximately a $2.5 million fund balance, but that would be over 4 years. That would also sustain all other line items as is, including the rate of dispatch reimbursement.
So which one of these revenue line items is affected by our public comment speaker?
The wire line, and that's the one that we've forecasted, if all things remain the same, at 2.7 million. By reducing it to 1180 is 2 million. So that is where the business rates have the greatest effect. There is a small negligible effect from the residential perspective, but it is predominantly all the business wireline service that affects that revenue stream.
Okay, so just for my own edification here, this man said that we had the highest rate in the state of Texas and the highest rate possibly in the nation?
I could partially confirm the former. I do not know about the national level. In the state of Texas, we have survey instruments and stuff that do show us this highest rate.
Okay. And why and how did we get to being the highest?
We got to high as part of my previous discussion or presentation in that we were trying to achieve a fund balance target of about 3.7 million to cover the cost of the next 911 project. We've since then realized the grants, and we don't have that pressure or that constraint upon us anymore. At the same time, I've proposed that we maintain a target fund balance of about 2 million or 2.2 with minor project monies, and then also sustain the current dispatch rate reimbursement becomes yet another variable. So if we think of all of this as a bunch of knobs on some kind of communications instrument, the two biggest knobs is the wireless or the wireline revenue and that rate that's associated with it, and then the expense of the dispatch reimbursement program. Those are the two big variables that we're playing with. And so if we adjust the wireline reimbursement rate, 1780, and we were to lower that, eventually we're going to have to address what we're doing with the reimbursement of the dispatch program.
So if we have the highest rate, it stands to reason that we give the highest to our dispatches of anybody in the state.
Correct. Out of all the districts and COGs, there's only one or two peers that are reimbursing the dispatch program. Of those, they're substantially lower in rates, but they're very small entities by comparison. So the size and nature of our programs, the rate at which we're reimbursing the dispatch program, all drive that rate up.
Okay, and so how much do we give to the city of Abilene dispatchers every year?
So in if we were to sustain that program this year, that would mean 3 years running, we've allocated 1.49 million to the city and 727K or thousand to the Taylor County dispatch. So approximately 2.2 million.
So we have a higher rate for businesses so that we can give our dispatchers more money.
The dispatch program is correct.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Which I'm all for dispatchers. And I think that the more we can help our dispatchers, the better. But at the same point in time, are you foreseeing as administration someday soon where we're going to have to adjust these numbers?
I believe that is our future. Now, I must also testify that I have spoken to the judge and I have spoken to the city manager at the city of Abilene, and they also see that it's basically a shift in taxing our customer to actually consumption of taxes from the sales tax, et cetera, of the income at the city and the Taylor County folks. So when we talk about a reduction in the dispatch program allocation, what we are doing is telling to those two political entities that they've got to use their tax money then to start paying for those dispatch programs. So we're shifting that burden from one tax basis to another tax basis. The city and Taylor County have indicated that they're willing to entertain the idea, but they would like to see it over a longer period of time and possibly slid to the future because of the certain economic constraints we have today, the sales tax not being what it might have been, for example. So we do receive pressure on that side of the equation to sustain the dispatch reimbursement program.
So is the dispatch program, have you adjusted that in this revised?
No, we've left it as a static allocation to reduce that variable of that one particular element and sustain that program as is. It was set approximately 3.5 years ago to approximately 63% of the estimated cost of those labor programs. So we might historically, from the board's perspective, remember the discussion around 60 and 63%, and the allocation be a measure of reimbursement against the projected budget for labor in both departments of dispatch.
Historically, when did we start historically with with the dispatchers getting as much as they get? Because I'm just trying to, was there a reasoning that we went to that in y'all's records? Are you aware of anything like that?
That is a fact I'm unaware of, but I know it reaches far enough back with the numbers that I've reached. It's probably about 5 or 6 years that I see it consistently being discussed and allocated as monies.
It was around 2019 that it was the increase. Now, they've always helped a little bit, but it was in turn for the district not to pay any in the dispatch softwares that we pay for both dispatch centers, both PSAPs. We pay for a software, certain things we weren't going to pay, we were not going to take on any more of their expenses and just strictly pay the salary, the FTE reimbursement back to both PSAPs. However, we are still paying for softwares and stuff, renewals and stuff for both PSAPs.
Okay, so in 2019, who was the administrator of the 911 board?
Bob.
I'll go for it.
So did all of this go into where we are today? When did we start? Why didn't we recognize that we were getting ourselves in a bind?
I think from what I can see forensically looking back across approximately 6 years, what was going on was there was a significant fund balance. There was a surplus of funds based on previous rate models that had built the fund up in excess of $5 and $6 million.
Yeah, one time we had 8.
Yeah, see, there you go. So what was going on is there was this internal balancing going on of lowering rates and consuming the fund balance on purpose. So they were trying to bring down that fund balance from that 6 or 8 million. By the time I took the helm, what was happening is we were dangerously and aggressively spending that fund balance to the tune of in excess of $1 million a year.
Yeah.
And so we had to take corrective action and not run this into the ground, so to speak.
Right.
So that's when we started looking at the rates, and then we did the Priest and Nichols exercise that we did the financial analysis this last year, and they came back and proposed rates that would allow us to be net neutral at that 3.7, because at that time we were sitting about 4 million something, and we were forecasting almost reaching a $2 million deficit and having to cover that with fund balance. We would have dipped dangerously below anywhere in the neighborhood of 3.7, and that would have caused an affordability problem for the next gen 911. So a lot of our rate decision approximately 12 months ago was based on the fact that we were going to have to fund that next gen 911.
And what are some of the things that we spent our money on to get us to that point when we had that fund balance?
The largest expense has always been the dispatch reimbursement. The rest of the program, when everything's
So when the city of Abilene moved their police department to the Kmart parking lot, how much did we give them for that? About, just ballpark, a bunch?
That was funded by the Senate. Oh, no.
So we didn't give them anything?
No, that was funded strictly by the
So we're, and I could go back and look at my notes, but y'all are probably more smart. What did we were spending that fund balance, what were we spending it on?
The predominance, approximately 2/3 annually across the years I've inspected, has been towards the reimbursement for the dispatch function at Taylor County and the city of Abilene.
So nothing, no special projects, no anything?
Nothing.
We still have regular expenses though.
We have the regular expenses that are in the $500,000 to $600,000 range every year, and then we've had a couple minor projects like the mobile data computers and stuff of the past, but those are typically in the $500,000-600,000 range and one-time opportunities or spends. The predominance of the reoccurring spend against the fund balance prior to our engagement with Freeze to remain net neutral has been the dispatch program.
Okay, that takes care of that. Has anybody else got any questions on that part of the revenue?
Just one quick question. If you know, Troy, so are there counties or districts that don't reimburse dispatch?
We believe through the survey instrument that there are only 2 of our peers across the couple dozen different COGs and districts, so we're one of 3.
Of our size or
Just
total?
one of 3 peers.
Total.
Out of the 28 emergency communications districts, there's only 2 other ones, and one is a super small one, and then the other one is a larger one. It's more in comparison to Harris County because it's got a lot. However, their reimbursement is still not at 100%. And not that ours is either, but they still have a limited, and they have a bigger population, they don't have to raise their rates because they have more population
More
to cover
lines.
for it, yeah.
And ours is about 63% right now.
It's
It was 63% 3 years ago. We have not done that measure since. We have maintained a flat, consistent allocation across the last 2 years.
And they've been raised, I'm sure. So.
They've
They've had raises, so our percentage is probably
yes,
going
I
to
would theorize, we could only do that at this time without the analysis, that it is no longer at 63%. It's something
Right.
less than that.
I think it's
Thank you.
67% of the budget amount, expense amount.
So again, I have forwarded a proposal that has a revised budget. There are line item revisions. For the most part, those are all minor corrections in how we've allocated the funds to the correct accounting codes, et cetera. So we've been cleaning up how we track our expenses. There are only a couple true additive numbers there. One is $69,000 for some software for both PSAPs, both dispatch areas. Another is an increase from $100,000 to $150,000 that reflects the labor that we've incurred here at my right. The rest of these numbers are fairly static and the same as we've seen in the past. We do recognize in this revision both the revenue of the grant and the Prop 8 money, as well as the proposed expense fully of that. So that's net neutral to the fund. With this revision and the lowering of the rates proposed on this proposal, it would take the fund balance and reduce it by $436,000 from the approximate $3.8 million to approximately $3.3.5 or $3.5 million. So this 170 for residential and 1180 is starting to take and reduce the fund balance on purpose down to that target of approximately 2.2. I would propose that that's the lower or the left end of a bookshelf. In the middle to sustain the dispatch reimbursement, but also sustain a reasonable fund balance of about 2.5 4 years out, a rate of $1.85 and $16 for business would be that target. And to sustain the $2 and the $17.80 that we currently have would basically become net neutral on both the fund balance and our expense projections. And that would leave this fund balance about 4 years out at 3.5, 3.6 million as it is today. So those are three marks that we could continue discussion on from a rate perspective. Rates are probably the biggest variable that you could affect with today's decisions.
Okay, before we go to that, I want to ask you about some expenditures.
Sure.
So if you look down to where it says professional services, remind me what $500,000 is spent for.
So this is the outsourcing of that GIS program. I have 5 individuals on a contract that are providing various services. Approximately $451,000 of that is directly related to the district's execution of the addressing program, managing the GIS data and providing that information to the computer-aided dispatch system for both Taylor County and the City of Abilene.
Okay, why the difference in cost from 2024?
We basically have incurred more personnel to accomplish those tasks as we've progressed. We've learned all the different aspects of that job. This actually matches pretty closely what the internal cost was a handful of years ago. We used to have 4 and 5 GIS personnel internal. That would have been to a cost of the city and the district of about $500,000. In last year, we were basically just ramping up and understanding what that program entailed. If the board remembers, and if the audience pleases, we approximately 2 years ago lost all of our GIS personnel, so we no longer have any internal personnel at all at this point. So we were faced with trying to fulfill this function and do so with outsourced personnel through a contract. In 24, you see the first part of that action being taken place.
Okay, so, but why the big difference between 2024 and 2025?
Originally, we only had 2 and 3 people on that contract. Today we have 5. And
Did we get the
performed-
job done
We
in
get the job-
2024?
We are getting the job done like unlike any time before. One of the things we suffered.
No, did we get the job done in 2024?
We got the job done, let's say meets expectations, and we barely got that job done. What we didn't realize at that time was everything we didn't know. And so we've been able to step up and start doing all of those functions. For example, there's been a huge backlog of effort to do some of the 911 addressing where you folks are running around and through a CAD system might not even have the streets and the addresses on that mapping system because it wasn't updated. So we've been able to go back and take a look at those historic things that should have been done as well.
So who does, as of today, who does our 911 addressing?
It's a company by the name of Resource Data, Inc. We have 5 individuals, a project manager, and 4 individuals of various technical skills that do all that work with us, to include engaging not only residents and developers, but like the U.S. Post Office, the planning community, et cetera.
And what do they cost us?
Approximately that $451,000 annually. That's the contract we have for them.
So professional services has nothing to do with Charla.
No, that line item is down below.
Okay, I'm with you. I just, let me go so I don't lose track of my thoughts here. (911) Administration GIS services.
That's the object code where we charge, or we are allocated in the city of Abilene for supporting the 911 district program. As I mentioned before, that has been Charla recently, and now we've added Rebecca. So the $100,000 was in the budget originally, and we were using that to cover our administrative costs. We've now consolidated that expense into Charla's office only, whereas it was across myself and others. We now have Charla managing that program 100% onto herself.
Okay, and of that 150, so you're telling me that those 2 people make $150,000?
The allocation is 100. No, that's actually not true from my paycheck perspective. With the city of Abilene, we pay a number of things as overhead, insurance, et cetera, contributions to RMS. So the cost to the city is approximately $100,000. They earn something less than that in their paycheck and their W-2. So then we call that wrapped rate, or the rate with overhead. There are a couple different labels that could use for that, but that's the equivalent of the wrapped rate.
Okay, so between these 2 right here, $150,000 is totally for their salary, insurance, and all that other stuff.
Correct.
Nothing else.
That's the allocation that the district is giving the city for their services, regardless of what their expense might be. We're saying we value that service from those folks at $100,000 and $50,000. $50,000 is a part of a year, mind you, so it's $100,000 annually, approximately, for 2 individuals. We've only just recently turned Rebecca full-time to this, and that's why this particular performance and budget revision at this point of this year is $50,000. It would be normally $200,000.
Okay, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding. This line item is for 2 employees.
Correct.
And because the reason I'm asking this is we voted as a board to give Mike Saxon a raise a long time ago. He never got the raise.
Okay.
I still don't know why that happened. But I want to make sure if this is the line item for that, that's what it's going for.
So the district has the authority to allocate funds to the city's program to support this labor. What we don't have as a district is the ability to edict any kind of raise, actual salary, et cetera. That is the city's job to administer themselves.
No problem with that, as long as they administer this amount.
Correct. This is allocated to the labor.
Now, if y'all want to pay them extra, that's up to y'all.
Yeah, right. This amount is allocated to cover the labor that is performed by Charla and Rebecca for a full-time effort across a year. proportionally for Rebecca, of course, because she's.
So if it's just a labor, then we don't pay for the insurance and all.
Labor, in my words, would have been defined as all elements of that labor cost, including the overhead.
Okay. So they're basically a City of Abilene employee that's gonna get a certain amount of money that's on this line item, plus their benefits.
The allocation goes to the labor. I think there's a nuance there. They don't get 100,000 or anything like that. That's an allocation. The city is responsible for administering their pay properly, and as you say,
That's not what I'm asking. I wanna make sure that this number is what we're spending, and that the City of Abilene doesn't have stuff left over that's going to something else. So,
Oh, no.
just
Saying
explain
the
that to me.
exact amount to the guy.
Yeah. This is fully consumed by their labor. Yes, and only their labor.
So, only their labor. So the City of Abilene takes care of their,
We take anything that is in excess of this.
Over this amount.
oh, so their salary is gonna be in this line item.
Correct. So Charlotte, let's theoretically say if I wrap everything up and I put a pretty bow on it, it costs the city $120,000. 100,000 of that is covered by this allocation. The city is then responsible for the other 20,000.
Okay. Now I got it in my head.
Okay. Yes, sir.
And that's with full intentions as well, is that, and you'll see in the proposed for 26 for professional services, we're gonna decrease that amount because we're gonna bring, Rebecca's gonna actually do addressing, and you can even, Cheryl can even vouch for how the addressing is real busy right now. So we have 2 full-time ones that is nonstop on that, but we're gonna bring one in-house.
I'm good. I just wanted to understand that for future reference. Okay, where is the line item that we pay the City of Abilene for other services?
For services,
For other things?
the other line items are the expenses of the district. The only other city line item would be for the dispatcher reimbursement, and then there's a Taylor County dispatch reimbursement.
Okay, so which line item is expenses for the district?
And Charlotte did correct me. At the bottom of the sheet, there's a couple lines that say fleet, fuel, fleet, maintenance, fleet, equipment, technology fund charges. Those are distribution of overhead costs at the city across all funds proportionally that are normally done. We, at the district, have declined to engage the services of the fleet vehicle on a go-forward basis, and we're proposing reducing that expense to 0. The $5,397 for the tech fund charge is an overhead spread cost on the technology support that is received by the district from the IT department at the City of Abilene. That would be the equivalent of the computers they use, the telco they use, the internet that they use, etc.
Okay, I got that part. So where do we pay for the copy paper?
Oh, yeah.
Say again?
Where do we pay for the copy paper?
Copy and paper is up here in printing costs.
And who do we pay that to?
Actually, it'll be a direct expense going forward, because I'll just use my P card and code it directly to our, so it doesn't even go through. I mean, it's the P card that's actually issued
So
to the city.
I guess what I'm saying is with the 2026 budget, are we getting away from the 911 board giving the City of Abilene a certain amount of money and then they do the things that they're gonna do? And you know we've done that before. And what I'm trying to figure out is how do we itemize that?
Okay. So I think a key word here is the direct expenses, which is the predominance of the upper 2/3 of the list, down to the line that says mobile and wireless, are all direct expenses incurred by the district. So these are expenses that we receive an invoice, we pay with district funds, and it's services or products or hardware that are directly delivered to the district. From that line that says mobile wireless, directly underneath that it says indirect cost expenses. That is the overhead for the rest of the city functions. This would be like payroll, finance, purchasing, those services that we enjoy from the city as a district to support our function. That is our proportional cost or share of those expenses. And then we've just recently discussed fleet and tech fund charges. Communications radio equipment is a direct cost to, although it's low on the list here visually, it is a direct cost to the district as well.
So will indirect expenses be itemized out at what they are?
No. I mean, we don't usually.
No, typically not. So those come to us typically from internal funds that are tax-based, that are spreading their costs out to the those departments that receive tax revenue.
Okay, so the nice legal lady's here. Does her office get something for coming here and being the legal for 911?
Yes, I believe so. That would be in the indirect cost expenses.
Those are the ones that I want to know the specifics about.
I believe with a little bit of homework, we could get you close to those numbers. But it would take a little bit more work than we've conducted to this date.
Mr. Chairman, if you're interested, our finance person is here, and I would be happy to have her come up and help answer that question for you.
Were you getting the eye?
No.
So Mr. Raines retired, by the way. So Marjorie has been the assistant director, but she is now the director. Just so he knows that you look a little different than Mike. It's been Mike for the past several years.
So our indirect cost expense is based on an annual plan. We have consultants that evaluate what we consider centralized services. So that includes your legal, your finance, your accounting, your purchasing. And we determine like allocation bases to use. They use those costs and allocate the costs across all the departments or divisions of the city that are using those services. So we can get you a detail in regards to telling you how much is going towards legal, accounting, purchasing. We don't have an itemized expense detail that goes behind that.
So just trust us?
So it's a commonly used plan that's.
I mean, that's what you're saying, we
allocate.
just trust us.
Yes.
I'm not a very trusting person. So as much detail as you can give me on that, I would appreciate something. And you can just shoot me an email, unless the board's interested in seeing it too.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah,
do that.
that'd be
Happy to.
great. Hey, welcome, congratulations on your promotion, and thank you for being here today.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to talk to you just a minute about mobile wireless cost. In 2024, our mobile wireless cost was at $271,000, and we have approved for 2025 $486,000. Would you reiterate to the board the reasoning for that, since we have a new board member?
So what we've seen is an increase in our telephone costs across the board. And so what we're recognizing there is the increased cost of the telephone service for the district. And it really comes to the rates that are being established and leveraged by the likes of AT&T.
And we have to pay 911 costs
For
too.
the upgrade, yes.
No, these fees also have to do with 911, or is that?
This is all 911 circuit-based. It says telephone, that's just the generic. This is all 911 based. It's AT&T's fiber circuits and stuff, but mobile and wireless is not. It's the 53904 phone that we pay, that we've always had. That's where we incur all the expenses, and they're all just put into that one accounting unit, but it really is all, it's circuits, it's 911 based technology. It's all for the district.
And apparently, if I'm understanding right, that cost is going to go down immensely in 2026 or in 2027?
26. Because hopefully by then, and we couldn't put it in proposed because we can't even propose. We don't want to say it's going to be half when it's not going to be. It will probably, I don't want to say it's going to be even half. It's going to significantly decrease because we are moving away from copper, which was about $35,000 a month, and that's down to about, I think about $12,000 total overall, and pushing all those accounts together, all of them together, just in a generic amount, about $12,000 from $35,000. So we'll get a big savings, but we can't estimate just yet until we get everything fully migrated over, because we will pay duplicate for 2 to 3 months to make sure that all communication, there's communication for the district. Fell over.
Right.
Meaning if.
And what did we spend $15,750 on mobile?
Oh, we don't. We just, that's, the revised amount is zero because we're moving that, that cost needs to be moved into phone because we don't really pay for mobile or wireless line. Now we have some that we pay for internet, just strictly a base amount that are actually fiber connections, like they actually give wireless connections.
And when you say for internet, are you talking about in the dispatch or are you talking about in the office?
I'm talking about the dispatch, not in the
Yeah,
office.
yeah.
No, not our stuff. This is all internet for the 911 based communication lines, 911 circuits.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the communication and radio expense, what was that again? That we have to, we approved that, and it's 57,302, the last one.
Yeah, that's just the same, that's just the, oh, I thought you were.
No, you go ahead.
No, the communication and radio equipment is strictly within the PSAPs, and like we use the recording software that they use at the dispatch, and Lindsay, she's my only one here, they have a recording that records all calls, so we pay the annual maintenance on stuff like that. It's strictly just a maintenance one, and then in 26, you'll see for the proposed, I actually moved it to public safety equipment, account code, not communication radio equipment. So the account code is strictly changing and the amount will decrease just because we don't plan on purchasing any new
So to
equipment.
record all the calls, it costs $250,000?
That's not the only equipment they use,
For both dispatches?
for both dispatches. And it's the same software, but at each location.
Okay, and has that been a consistent cost?
That's
Okay. Does any of the board have any other questions on expenditures? If not, I'll entertain a motion on BR 25-03, the resolution of approving the proposed FY 2025 budget revisions.
So before we do that, does that also include proposed changes to the revenue, or are we just talking expenses at this point?
I think we looked at Kelly, but I think you have a motion second, and then you can have discussion and make any amendments.
Well, so far, he's just a call, there's been no motion.
Okay.
So that's my question, before we get to the motion portion, do we want to discuss revenue as well?
If it pleases the chair.
Well,
Or do you want to split these into two different actions?
The reason that.
We can't. I don't think we can, 'cause it's
the
the
resolution has them
So they
both.
can see it later. That's what he's talking about. This is the revenue amounts over there.
so here's my thought process. I don't know if I'm prepared today to look at these three options that you gave me. I'm explain the three options one more time.
So we've reviewed the expenses. In addition to that is the revenue estimates that are part of the revision to the budget. We've talked lightly about the wireless has moved from 848 to an estimated 1.1, so that's part of the proposed revision to revenue. We've talked a little bit about the wireline revenue and the fact that I have proposed in this document a rate change to $1.70 and $11.80 that would yield approximately 2.05 million revenue estimated. I've also presented verbally that at $1.85 and $16 per business line, that same number would be 2.2 million. And then if we were to sustain the $17.80 and $2 residential, then it would be 2.3 million. This 11.80 before you on paper lets us start to reduce our fund balance to target of about 2.2, 2.5 million. And also ramp down, acknowledging ramping down in a couple years the rate of reimbursement for the dispatch program. So that's acknowledging a downward or diminishing of reimbursement of the dispatch program. $16 and the associated $1.85 will allow us to sustain a fund balance that diminishes slower and allows us to maintain over 4 years plus that dispatch rate of allocation, but also diminish the fund balance down to about 2.5 million. So that's the sweet spot, I call it. The current $2.1780 per business would allow us to be relatively net neutral on our financials and sustain the dispatch rate of allocation, but also continue to sustain approximately a $3.6 million fund balance, well above what I proposed as a target.
It seemed.
So, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Troy, at the last meeting, I think we addressed this reimbursement thing, and Judge Crowley was here, and you said you've had conversations with him since then, but we didn't make any progress. I mean, we didn't get any commitments.
No, and if I could propose, if there is a reluctance to decide today, one of the things you could do, because we have some time, is we could table this and do that more formal interaction with both the judge and the Taylor County folks and the city manager, and bring that feedback to a subsequent meeting where we could make that decision.
So if we make changes today, when do they take effect? 30 days?
We have 90-day window that we have to acknowledge and make the announcement. So June 1st is typically the target if we make it today. If we were to make that same decision 60 days from now, then it would automatically kind of move to August 1st.
If we go down to the lowest one that you said there, which is 11 something, that will give us a fund balance after our expenditures for 2026 at what?
It's on the bottom of our paper that we have before us. It would reduce our fund balance by 436 and bring the fund balance from approximately 3.8 million right at this moment to 3.35 million.
Okay, at a 3.35 million fund balance, are we prepared for contingencies?
Yes and no, because if we bring that rate down, I'm assuming we're not going to bring it back up. So we force the consideration for the rate of reimbursement to the dispatch program to a sooner year. So that will aggressively press on the...
Is that counting any possible growth coming in?
No, it does not. That is a good question. So as I presented earlier at the top of the hour, so to speak, wireless service is estimated to grow to approximately 1.1 million this fiscal year. If they're successful at a legislative body level at the state of Texas, and we see a doubling of that, for example, that would mean that we would receive 2 million, not 1 million. So there are other variables.
I'm not mad, I just got to stand up.
Yeah, I have knees like that too. I'm wondering about that.
Well, I'll just tell you what I'm thinking. To be the highest rate in the state of Texas is not a good look for the city of Abilene. For two reasons. For Taylor County and the city of Abilene. For two reasons. How many people take into consideration those costs before they move here? Businesses move here. Has anybody from the Development Corporation talked to the city of Abilene about this, or anybody that I'm aware of?
I have not.
Not that I'm aware of.
And see, that's my hesitation. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if there is an average statewide on these rates that we can look at and determine.
Well, and
I
that's.
know it's hard to set that based on population and so forth,
Yeah,
but
and we're kind of in a unique situation is that we got behind. I think I know the reason why, and it's frustrating to me, but we can't look backwards. We got to start from today. And I think if we lowered those rates to the lowest one that you said, with the anticipation of a growing economy, then for 2026, we can always come back and revise it again, correct?
Correct.
And we can go up,
You could go up.
or we can drop things that we pay for. But this would give some relief to what our speaker, public comment speaker said today. It would also put us in a position to where we're putting the red light out that, hey, this is serious business and we got to start looking at dodging some of these things, to take the vernacular of the day. But that's kind of where what my thought process is. I'd be interested to hear the board members' other thoughts.
Along with the revenue, you have to, so growth is gonna count. It would be hard to do an average for the mere fact of population size.
I
And
just
that's
wonder if
what
our public speaker might know that.
what's
I
that?
think he said the highest
On
rate
average.
was $6.81.
That's pretty close to what it is. But you have to count for revenue, oh, go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, so just during my research, I've actually got some other documents in there that I pulled from like the city of Lubbock and things like that, showing the rates. And I know that the, so to speak, business model is not the same as they spoke to, is there's only 2 or 3 other emergency communications districts that fund dispatchers, things like that. Which that burden, I think, needs, from my opinion, needs to be shifted back toward the county and the city. And 911 is for 911 only, but the rate that you were asking
Well, just
about.
say 911, the dispatchers are the 911 people.
Yes, correct.
Both sets of them, county
Yes.
and city.
Yes,
And that's why we work so closely with our dispatchers.
Sure.
Because 911 wouldn't work without them.
absolutely, and I understand. And the rates that I'm seeing is, I'm just wondering how those are funded, you know, those other districts, how are they getting their funding to cover those dispatchers? Because I mean, from what I've seen in my research, there's some that fund the whole district completely, like Harris County, some of those others. They're funding all the dispatchers' salaries and things like that, as well as the 911 equipment. And one thing I'd like to mention too is that the wireless, when you look at people making 911 calls, where is the majority of the calls coming in from? They're coming in from a cellular device, and that's why I think it's very important to, what Mr. Swanson said here is that wireless revenue coming in, and I've heard this from the West Central Texas Council of Governments and everybody else, they're pushing for that to get to at least 75 cents, which will increase the revenue. So the rates that I've seen, like I said earlier, I'm trying to find my note here, they range from anywhere from 50 cents to $6.80 as far as what the rates are. And the way they're being charged does vary between a business line and a trunk, which is old terminology. There's not really anything that says VoIP, and that's where I found that Texas Administrative Code that said that if you have, it gives a little graph or chart, and I can show you all that if you want me to, but it's a 81 to 100, you only pay 30 business line charges for, yes, because there's a cap on it, and it's a percentage of the number. So like 1 to 10, you pay $17.80 right now times 10. You go above the 11 to 20 range, it's another number. And I have a chart in my briefcase there, but
Thank you.
does that answer?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Other comments?
So we have to also count for in the revenue and wire line that people are moving away from wire line in general. So that's not gonna be a set revenue that we can count on. Wireless is something we definitely wanna count on because people are moving, but they're moving away, and the higher the rates keep going, they're really gonna be moving away from wire line. So that's really just not a steady revenue to count, but in layman's terms, you reduce the expenses, you don't have to make as much revenue, so.
What do you think we should set it at?
I'm not real sure about that. I'm down for the lower rate, but that's also because I have actually spoke with lots. I have been in contact, and we had a lot of emails for a while when the rate first changed from just local businesses and local consumers, just residential line as well. And that's not, I mean, it is a high rate for residential. We are off the rates, we are off the charts in business. rate.
And what is your recommendation, Troy?
It's a balancing act. And I'd like to reiterate that if we were to lower and sustain the 1180 and the 170 proposed in our paper before us, or resolution before us, it does allow us approximately a 2-year window to continue to reimburse the dispatch program as is. It would, at the end of the second year, diminish the fund balance down to approximately 2.6 million. It's at that point in that budget cycle, so that would be the February meeting in 26, that we would have to discuss our expenses or raising rates, because we have engineered purposely with the $11.80 diminishing the fund balance at a rate that we cannot sustain without addressing expenses. The fine point or the nuance that I think we're talking about versus, 1180 versus 16 versus 1780 is 1180, we forced that decision approximately a year out from now. At $16, I'm proposing that shifts that decision point out to approximately 4 years, 2 more years, and the ability to sustain that dispatch rate. And that nuance between those two is what provides the city and Taylor County an opportunity to properly fund those positions internally versus looking to us for that allocation. So what we're really saying with those two models, 1180 and 16, is shall we challenge the county and city with the funding of those dispatch positions on their own in 2 years or 4 years? And that's the position we're going to place those agencies in.
Have you, since you work for the city of Abilene, have you heard any discussion on this within management?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to share?
Be happy to. Yeah, it is all about balance, and Troy is exactly right. What's before us really is we have, just like any household budget, we have to manage revenue with the cost of doing business. And the cost of doing business is really not going down. The anomaly here is that we have the next gen 911 system that we had to fund. We were very fortunate that we were able to come up with the Bill 9 or the Prop 9 money plus the grant. Without that, we would be in the red, plain and simple. That is the reason that the rates went up, is because that was not a guarantee at the time that decision was made. Honestly, that was good news for both the city and for the county. It allowed us to stay solvent and to have a fund balance as opposed to being in the red. Here's the dirty little secret. There is no red. We can't go in the red. There is no backstop. Just like the adjustments of the rates up and down, there are two revenue streams, honestly. There is the wireless, which we have no control over, and that is all by the state of Texas. That's that 50 cents per line for the wireless calls or the wireless service. If they go up to 75 cents, we'll go from $1 million to $1.5 million, roughly. $500,000 isn't going to do much, but it's going to help. Especially when you start talking about the wired expenses, that's the other part that we do have control over. And yes, we have gone from from $1.70 to $2 on the residential. It was 30 cents, it was a little bit, but that is where most of the actual customers, they're basically the residential if you look at the total revenue. On the commercial side, there is a push to get away from wired service completely, to go to voice over IP or to go to something else, go to internet. I think that those are going to continue to disappear just based upon the trends that I've seen so far. I think that it is appropriate for us to lower the rates because our fund balance is growing, but I think it's also prudent on us not to lower it too quick where we have to come back in 24 months and now jump back up to a higher rate. I don't want to go up and down. I don't want to be like a swing in this situation or teeter-totter. I do think that it's good for us to lower the rates, but I would probably settle in the middle and to look to see what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with the state legislation. We don't know what's going to happen with the existing customers on the business side, even on the customer side. There's a lot of people that are no longer using wired service for their business. They're going to just cell service. If they do, we're going to have even less revenue from this $2 that we're currently charging for like a residential. And I would like to recommend, in my own person, this is my own personal opinion, that we hit the middle and then give us the flexibility to additionally reduce the rates if some of these other things do happen, such as the state statute passing and it goes from 50 cents to 75 cents. And if we don't see a reduction in the number of wired lines, because it is part of our revenue that then helps to pay for our expenses. The whole thing of shifting the burden from the 911 district back to the county and to the city, let's just be honest, it's all taxes, whether it's coming through the fee for your business service or whether it's coming through your property taxes. It's still going to pay for the same expenses. All we're really deciding is who are we going to shift it on? Is it going to come through their telephone service or through their tax bill? The dollars don't change. The expenses are still what they are. And I think that based upon what I've heard from the state of the city address a couple of weeks ago, there's a lot of challenges at the county and there's a lot of challenges of the city of what is not known and things that are going to have to be paid for. Because of that, I hate to push the burden off onto those two entities immediately. I think that if we go slowly, we go deliberately, and we can have a 5-year plan, but I think we only commit 1 year at a time.
And so what rate would you recommend?
I would recommend that the residential rate go from $2 down to $1.85. And I'd also recommend that the commercial rate go from the $17.80 just to a flat $16. That would basically sustain our existing expenditure, and hopefully the money coming in, money going out would be the same. And then we could review that again at our next meeting, whether it be 2 months or 6 months or 12 months. And then once again adjust based upon the facts at that time.
So, meeting in the middle would be, what happens if we go to 15?
We might diminish the fund balance a little bit faster than that 4-year that I forecasted, down to that same 2.5 million. So let's theorize that's 3 years. And in that same move, we would then challenge the Taylor County folks and the city folks to address their dispatch allocation and their ability to cover the labor also at that 3-year mark, theoretically. So, you know, it becomes which timeline do we want to embrace by having that discussion at this board, because the decision is ultimately here at this board, to diminish that allocation for the dispatch programs. And our ability to understand the cities and the counties' constraints and impacts of that.
And nobody wants to see the dispatchers get any less money. I mean, they need to be paid more, in my opinion, because I've been dependent on a dispatcher a lot of times, but we're taxing the citizens' property and we're to pay 40% of it now, and we're taxing like a consumer-based tax to pay the other 60 now. I'm glad we do that. I think a consumer-based tax is more appropriate. You know, you're the one that calls 911, you're the one that pays the dispatcher, so to speak. So, but at the same rate, we can't go in the hole, we can't hurt ourselves. Probably in the middle is what I would vote for too.
So to answer both points, again, this is the proposal is like that $16. One of the side effects of that is we also approach a fund balance purposefully in a 4-year period, plus give the county and the city an opportunity to analyze and look at the impacts of that reduction if we were to ever propose a reduction in the allocation. So that's why I call it a sweet spot. It allows us to maintain our reimbursement. It also allows us to diminish the fund balance in a very purposeful, planned way down to that approximate 2.5 million in that 4-year period. So we wouldn't overconsume, we wouldn't over-recover. We'd be in that sweet spot and give us a 4-year window to continue to consider this.
And at the same time, we have been slowly, by staying static on the reimbursement, we've been slowly reducing the percentage that we reimburse.
Correct. You made that point
Right, so-
prior relative to cost of living increases and other things that the dispatchers have received. Our allocation may have originally been calculated at 63%, say, but today, if we were to do the math, it's probably something less than that.
Like 60 maybe,
Yeah,
close to
I've
that.
not done that homework, but yes.
Okay, so I got a question then. Who at the city and who at the county is our 911 administration working with to get these?
Our best engagement to negotiate any kind of change in the allocation and the effect on those agencies starts at the city manager and the judge for the Taylor County.
And so y'all are gonna be working with them soon, I assume, to have some direction on which way to go on their budgets?
Correct. We've had some of those initial conversations already with both agencies and both the heads of those agencies. And conceptually, they understand what we're talking about, but at the same time, they're protective of their programs and their ability to support their tax-based services. And any reduction in those allocations is going to negatively have impacts on both agencies. And they state that purposely. And to answer your question a little bit further on a go-forward basis, yes, we would have to sit down with them and start playing this out and start talking about how we can address that reimbursement allocation, because on a go-forward basis, if we don't do anything, we will have to sustain fairly high rates in the program across our peers. So we would always be an outlier. So, and that's something we'd have to accept if we continue the program as is.
The year end, September 30, the 3.349 million is predicated on the 170 and 1180 rate.
Correct.
Do we know how that number would change if we moved the change to the $1.85 and $16?
Yes, I do have one of those models with me, and if we were to do that, we see a consumption of the fund balance of 436,000 approximately. It would be 286,000 at that point at $16 for the business line, and that would reduce our fund balance to approximately almost right at 3.5 million. So a little less consumption and leaving us with a greater fund balance in this current fiscal year. As we move forward across the years, in the next year, we'd consume the fund balance by 220,000, reduce it to about 3.3. The third year, we'd reduce it by 320,000. The fund balance would then come in just under 3 million. And in the fourth year, we would start to consume more because of the time value of money. 420,000 consumption of the fund balance, we would be down at that 2.5 million that I've mentioned in the fourth year.
But that's predicated on
Everything else
rates
being
staying, no additional lines coming in.
everything else being equal, and we've discussed the impact of what wireless increase.
So it's about a $200,000 bump to adjust the rates from the 170 to the 185
this year.
and the 1180 to $16.
This year, next year, correct. It's approximately 300,000 consumption of fund balance. And then we would sustain all other lines.
Okay, we've heard a lot of discussion. Do you want to address does the board want to address the revenue today? And if you do, I would entertain a motion.
Well, I'll throw it out there and we'll see what happens. I'll recommend that we accept the staff recommendations on expenses and that we allow the proposed revenue changes from $2 to $1.85 on the residential lines and from $17.80 to $16 on the commercial lines.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
And just to clarify, this is for Resolution BR 2503 with those two changes.
Yes, ma'am.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion on changing our 911 taxing rates? If not, all in favor say aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So we just voted on the budget, all of it together, right?
We've approved the revision to the fiscal year 25. We have before us the next agenda item, that's the fiscal year 26, next year's budget.
Right. All right, I always want to say BR 549, but it's BR 25-04, the FY 2026 budget. Charlotte, Mr. Swanson, which one of y'all are going to talk about this?
So this is our next year's fiscal budget. In the fiscal cycle of things, we propose a budget at this timeline, and this spring, it's basically finalized and becomes part of our next fiscal year as of October 1st. So before us is the decision we proposed on a expense and revenue that was predicated on the originally proposed rates. So we would have to acknowledge that we now have a current rate for this fiscal year going into it of $185 and $16 respectively. So that changes the numbers a bit, or you could adopt this proposed on paper, 170 and 1180. The numbers before you reflect that $11.80 business line, and it does show that we would sustain the dispatch program. That aggressive of a reduction in rate at that time has all the same similar effects we just discussed. So before you would be the opportunity to revise those rates or improve the rates that you just approved for 25 for this 26 fiscal year. And all other expenses, as you'll scan down through, are very synonymous. We have a couple, do we have it on the screen? Here you can see we did the revenue analysis on the 1180. You can see how we're kind of static in 1 year. The next screen shows the following year where we're seeing that step down. And then here's the one I'm referencing right at the moment. So if we look at the expenses, I know there's questions on the expense line items. Just scanning down through them, we have a couple increases that reflect some of our additional costs going into this next fiscal year. As we shift some of the GIS effort and things inside, we will see an increase in our direct printing costs to the district. You'll see also that we're trying to reduce our equipment maintenance, coming down from 100,000 to 50,000. And Charlotte has pointed out, to our benefit of bringing Rebecca on board, we'll be able to reduce those professional services from that 451 previously discussed down to an estimated 350. We've taken corrective action on a couple other things as far as software subscriptions, down from approximately 70,000 to 35,000. We do see an additional requirement for training. This is for the dispatch folks at both the county and the city, and we're budgeting for that properly at 19,500 from 4,500. Sliding down a little bit further at object code 53600, this is where we had 150,000 for that IT labor, Charlotte and Rebecca. Rebecca would be with us full-time in that fiscal year projected, so we brought that number up to 200,000. Dispatch, we've left alone. We brought the telephone cost down, or to approximately the even number that we have today. Charlotte mentioned that we don't have clear estimates on whether that's net neutral or a diminishing of that cost. So we've proposed a sustaining of that budget line item for telephone until we are clearer on what those expenses are going to be. And the same kind of rolls down to the others until we get to communications or radio. That's where Charlotte, 270,025 was a one-time expense, and you're showing the benefit of those investments in the Next Gen 911, where that communication and radio equipment cost will come down to 50,000 from a previous mark of about 100, high mark of one-time cost of 270, now proposed at 50,000. So there's some of the savings we're starting to get. That, if I were to look at my separate piece of paper for 16 for that year, should I get the right column? We, as I mentioned to Philip, Mr. King, our new member, in that year, we would bring down the fund balance with that proposal at the $16 per business line and $1.85 for residential by $220,000 in fiscal year 26 estimated, and that would bring our fund balance down to $3.3 million forecasted.
Well, it seems to me that all the arguments we just had and all the discussion we just had for 25 applies to this as well.
And I think it would be the board's decision whether to embrace and continue and sustain the $1.85 and the 16, and thus we would see an amendment to propose that change. Or you could decide to embrace this model, but again, all the discussion we've had applies.
So for our 2026 budget, you think that we can sustain at $1.70 and $11.80?
We can sustain for, that would be a guess because I haven't run that model of changing the rate out at that point, but we would probably be able to sustain a reimbursement of the dispatch allocation program that year and the next, but we would bring in that 4-year mark for proposed changes to the dispatch allocation in by 12 months probably. We'd force the decision 12 months earlier.
Any questions for Mr. Swanson? Well, depending on how things turn out, I would like for us to review this rate change before a year is up. So we have another meeting scheduled when?
I would, that is a very good question, Chair. I would like to propose that given the variables of everything that we got going on in the Next Gen 911 project, I would propose the board entertain quarterly meetings. So we would talk about reconvening in May, if I calculate that correct.
So actually, the decrease, the rate change would not have even became effective just yet. So all we're still doing is proposing on those because it doesn't become effective till June the 1st.
At the same time, we will have Next Gen 911 activity. We could possibly see efforts by the legislative body to change the wireless. So the thought is quarterly at a quarterly pace, we could give routine updates and then leverage those meetings purposefully for not only the fiscal year reporting, but our projects and progress on rates. I would be able to update all the models and present you a up-to-date model as of that May timeframe.
And we would also have an opportunity to visit with the
Correct.
the head of the.
If so directed, and if I feel directed, I would sit down with the judge and the city manager, have all those conversations, and actually have them provide true input through our voice to this board.
Who is the acting city manager?
The city manager is Robert Hanna until the end of March.
Yeah.
He's still here. And so, not that that's part of our discussion, we are looking for replacement for him, and that process is very, very active, and they're expecting that to move very quickly. So we'll see what happens. I don't know that we'll have somebody on board by May. I would say we'll probably have somebody 6 months from now, if not before.
So I would be sure to speak with Mr. Hanna before he departs.
He's got a deputy, doesn't he?
He does.
Mm-hmm.
Who's that?
That is Mindy Patterson.
And then, is she leaving too?
Not today. Yeah. She is going to be here through the transition of the new city manager. Beyond that, I can't speak for her. That is, I don't know what her schedule looks like.
What do y'all think about these quarterly meetings? I know you don't have anything else to do.
They might be shorter.
Well, maybe. I think that the
Yeah,
next quarterly
I agree with
meeting, honestly, the only thing you're gonna be able to provide us with is an update on where we are on the next Gen 911. I'd recommend that we maybe move it out to 5 to 6 months, and then we may want to institute a quarterly based upon what's changing. Because you'll have no input on the rate changes and how that's affecting your revenue. And if there's any changes in that based upon the number of people on both sides, the wireless and the wire lines. And I don't want to meet just to meet.
June and July will give us a lot better estimate of expenses as well, to be able to, significantly, not dispatch reimbursement, but other, the telephone expense and all that. We'll have a
Yeah.
much better idea.
Well, let's plan one in July then.
Okay?
Is that 6 months?
Close enough.
So do we table voting on the 26th?
Is that what you want to do? Or make a motion for today?
No, I believe, especially if we delay any other meeting to July or later, we need to have a approved budget to enter into the financial system.
By
And meet
when?
that kind of count. Marjorie, when
May.
do we have to have a budget that would be approved by this board into the system?
Just as long as we get it before the fiscal year begins, the 2026 budget.
So we
Before September
could,
30th.
so they could table this till July?
Yes.
Yeah, do we need a motion for that?
You can make a motion to table since you're not taking action on this, and then you would remove it from the table. It would be on the agenda, and you would remove it from the table in July.
I make a motion that we table this until our July meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that's tabled. Informational memorandum. Troy Swanson, BIM 25-03.
So here, you're starting to see us actually gain traction on our financial situation. Our goal is to develop a 5-year long-range financial plan for the district. And this is our first presentation of that effort. This is predicated, as we get to the next slide that's in your packets and on the screen, it is predicated on leveraging that 2.2 million fund balance target, and the fact that we also need to be, and part of that 2.2 is the 2 million for the fund balance, as well as 200,000 for minor projects, the ability to invest in ourselves. The district at this time doesn't really have a good process for that, so we're proposing as part of the long-range financial plan a process by which we do propose those minor projects. And on the next slide, we see a busy spreadsheet that includes the 2 fiscal years that we just spoke of, plus an additional 5. And here's where we were playing out that number in a long-range financial plan, the reduction in rates. And over on the right, you can see is we've achieved in this forecast by negotiating reductions in the dispatch allocation down to approximately 10% in that 5th year out. The ability to lower rates all the way down to 75 cents residential and $1.75, if I remember right, business. So that's right in that average zone, by the way, for what it's worth. But that would take aggressively reducing, and those orange rows, you can see the cells in our 4 out years, the dispatch allocation. And at the top of this sheet, you can see the percentage reductions that we're talking about. So I know you all can't see the number, but this cell comes down to 1,500,000 for Taylor County, but it's a 30% discount. Of course, it's about 30% of 1.5 and 727. Then we're proposing a 60% reduction, an 80% reduction, and a 90% reduction. So that's basically 10% of the current allocation in that out year.
You want to
This
say what
being
year?
fiscal year 30 is where that is. That is an aggressive move. We're asking for aggressive change in how we're allocating funds, but we're aggressively reducing those rates. We can do, that's the equivalent of a bookshelf end, right? And then what we're doing today would be the other end. In between is a lot of different opportunities. I would enjoy the opportunity, to, as it sounds like, especially in July, to go through some of those models at your request and be able to demonstrate how those decisions around rates and revenues and expenses makes a difference. And we could measure that with my interaction with the city manager and the judge over at the county with their input on how they feel about those kinds of models. So I would propose that we would use that July meeting to have that kind of a discussion around this long-range financial plan. What we're looking for here is, today, we're just presenting a concept and a plan. Tomorrow, figuratively speaking, what we would like to see is the board adopt ownership of that long-range financial plan and use it as a tool to understand our finances over that long of a period so we can develop a stable financial model with good fund balance targets, expense targets, the opportunity to reinvest in ourselves, et cetera.
Is this long-range plan something you're gonna take to the judge and the city
Correct.
manager?
I think that's imperative. Is what we're looking for is the timing that makes best sense for those agencies and their input on that timing. Because when we talk about reducing the dispatch allocation, we're affecting their operation. They have lots of intents for those monies too. And so we're challenging them, literally challenging them on how to afford their dispatchers in lieu of another thing that they're supposed to be trying to achieve, their sphere of influence. So pay rates and sheriffs and those kinds of things that we heard about at the state of the city from the judge. You know, he has to take this down into effect.
Troy, did you say that this has already been informed by the city manager or?
I've read it by the city manager, but not the judge. The city manager said all that I've expressed here is that he would like to see it play out a little bit over a longer period of time. But I've only been able to spend like 20 minutes with him on that, is on a different agenda. So I would take the action item away to go spend formal time with those two individuals and their agencies and whoever that needs to be to discuss it, so I have formal input back to you folks as the board.
It seems like a good tool, so this would be the ideal situation in order to get our rates down towards what the averages are across the state.
Right.
Although this is going to remain fluid as it's informed by the judge and the mayor.
And the model is sophisticated enough that we can run different numbers. At the same time, one of the other new duties Rebecca has is she updates this every month with our actual revenues. So as we move forward, we're capturing actual numbers in here too, and the forecast then is able to be informed by that. So.
Gotcha.
So this is a living capability to help us manage the impact of rates and expenses, or revenues and expenses on each other.
Questions? I think that you can add that to the agenda on that.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think there's nothing to vote for here, is there?
No, it was an informational piece just to let you folks know that we're developing a more sophisticated ability to manage our finances.
Before we adjourn, I just want to say thank you to you three and the hard work you put into this. Look forward to you putting even more hard work into it later.
Thank you for your time.
I want to
All of y'all.
welcome our newest board member. He was introduced.
Thank you.
He's been around here for a while.
Born and raised.
Born and raised. And thank y'all for coming today. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.